Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Good. This is part 2 of my conversation with May Busch, who's an international executive, speaker, and best-selling author. She is passionate about helping people thrive at work and reach their full potential. In this second part of my conversation with May, we delve into strategies for effectively conveying your message and influencing others. We discover how to articulate your core message using the 5-minute rule and the rule of 3, and understand the importance of adopting a Rainmaker mentality over a Caretaker approach for career and organizational success. Enjoy. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we engage with esteemed thought leaders and explore research-backed strategies and techniques that empower leaders at every level to achieve meaningful results that drive lasting change. Well, let's move into the next piece of this, and this is around communication. Communication is so critical for any leadership role, but for every person to really focus on and to get better at. And you state that, to be good at communicating in ways that connects with people and influences outcomes, you need to do 3 things, and they are focus keenly on the audience, listen with an open mind, and understand and draw on their sources of influence. And you have a great story that really unifies these 3 with Dick Fisher.
I was given an offer to go back to this firm in investment banking, and I was there for a selling day. So they were trying to sell me on joining the firm because I had other offers too. And one of my meetings is with the CEO. And I thought, wow, what am I going to say to the CEO? I've never met the CEO before. So they take me up the elevator. The doors open. It's very quiet. There's mahogany everywhere. Everything's carpeted. I get ushered into his room, his office. There's a Persian carpet. I could swear there was a fireplace, but I'm pretty sure in a 50-story building in Midtown Manhattan, there was no fireplace. But so we sat down and we just had the best conversation. He answered all my questions. And he said, "Is there anything else?" And I thought, "Oh my gosh, we've been here for hours." "No," I said, "I'm all set." And he said, "Well, thank you for coming in, May." Get ushered out. My handlers, they have somebody leading me around. They then usher me to the elevator. I look at my watch. 20 minutes had passed. Only 20 minutes. And that was the most listened to I have felt in my entire life. And it was as though this CEO that he had so much time for me. It was just the 2 of us in the entire world, and I was the most important person in the entire world for those 20 minutes. That's how I felt. And that is an amazing level of connection and communication. And Charles, we talked about how in this particular day and age that everybody's distracted. We have our smartphones, we've got notifications. I mean, that kind of depth of connection and engagement is really going to make you stand out as a leader, because most people have lost the ability to do that or need to be reminded of that. But it's so powerful.
You're right, and I hear this a lot from great leaders that when people talk to them, they make them feel like they're the most important person in the room, that no one else is there with them. Such a critical leadership skill that I think is not focused on enough. You give some great tips in this part of the book on how to prepare and deliver your core message, and you mentioned the 5-minute rule and the rule of 3, because a lot of people now get a little bit too verbose, and you really have to get to your point the more senior your audience is.
Yeah. So the 5-minute rule is one that says that you, at least 5 minutes before your next meeting or next important conversation, you want to drop whatever it is you're doing and think about, synthesize what is it that you want to say or ask. So you just want to get your head into the space, which then relates to the rule of 3, which is that you don't want to make more than 3 main points. So in that 5 minutes, you want to be jotting down your 3 main points or 3 points and question, um, because the human brain cannot hold on to more than 3 ideas at the same time and remember them all. So if you're gonna talk about 5 or maybe 5 is okay, but 7 or 10, it's a laundry list. So make sure you're really focused on 3, and there's something about 3 that is very attractive for people to, from a brain science perspective. So it also helps you to be succinct, to the point, and not forget what you're gonna say.
Great. The other part of it really is that creating that feedback loop. And even the most eloquently delivered messages, they're ineffective if they don't land in the way that you intend. So you need to, as you're delivering it and getting feedback, look for those nonverbal cues. Listen with an open mind. And I think a lot of people focus, when they focus on communication, they focus on their message. Not enough is being focused on your listening skills.
Yeah, exactly, and, I think of communicating like you're tossing a ball. So imagine, Charles, if I've just tossed you a ball, but you were looking that way, and it just kinda bounces off your shoulder. That's not it's like somebody saying, "Well, I sent her an email." It's like, who knows whether they saw it or not? But it's the same thing, orally or verbally. I need to toss the ball to you so that you know it's coming, and then you can catch it, and then you toss it back to me, right? That's the conversation. I say something to you, you go, "Oh, yeah, got it." And then you say something back to me. So that is a true communication. Otherwise, is just possibly people talking past each other type of thing. Yeah. So that requires that you pay attention to the other person and also use words and phrases that the other person can instantly get, because words words mean different things to different people. Like just yesterday, I was talking to my business partner about we're putting together a new website with an app. And I said, yes. And then it's going to be beautiful. And he said, well, and it turns out to him, beautiful meant with flowers and curly cues, which is not our style whatsoever. And what I mean by beautiful is this beautiful, clean design that he always comes up with. So you can see, even people that work together a lot, we can have different interpretations of words. So you really want to be thoughtful about communication and check on how things are landing.
Right, and the nonverbal is just as important as what's being said. You're right, know your audience, making sure that you're speaking in their language, and then ask for clarification, hopefully to reduce that ambiguity that happens where if you say beautiful website, that means something different to that other person that you're communicating with. So really looking at the WIFM, right? What's in it for them, for the audience, and speaking in their language and knowing your audience is really critical in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because you even know somebody doesn't mean that at that moment they're going to receive it. So that's why, in the example I just gave, I was watching for my business partner's reaction, and I saw he kind of went and he frowned. And so I said, "Oh, tell me more about that. And I see you frowning. Tell me what that meant for you." And that's how we got to talk about it.
Let's move to the next section. That's working on the business, and that's being a game changer. Involves being able to envision a future of your business and devise a way to achieve that vision and strategy. Also, it's involving decision making and creating a new business. Three capabilities. We are going to unpack all three, but let's move to that decision making because every great leader needs to take action despite uncertainty. And what are some ways in which you can help leaders or just individuals in general really just improve their decision making practice?
So I think the first thing that you want to figure out is you need to be able to be decisive as a leader. And I know this because it's something that I struggled with early on. And the things you struggle with, you always struggle with, but just less so. And so this being decisive and being able to then decide and move on, those two are really important for leaders. And the reason I know this is because I was kind of middle of my career. I was doing well in so many ways, especially with clients and the work of it. But then the big boss, my skip level boss, pulled me into his office one day and he said, "May, I need you to decide and move on. Decide, move on." And he did this motion with his hand. I'll never forget it. It's like chop down for decide and then swoosh to the left or right, depending on which way you're facing, to move on. Decide, move on. Decide, move on. Because I would be able to see all sides of the argument and then I said, "Yeah, I think this is the right thing." And then I go, "Yeah, but on the other hand," and it was just getting really tiresome and it looked like dithering. And leaders, top leaders, you can't just be dithering. You have to decide and move on and not keep looking back like, "Oh, I made a mistake." Because as a leader, you're going to make a lot of bad decisions. That's because you have to make a lot of decisions. And this part isn't in my book, but I was reading Colin Powell, a quote from him saying that something like, he doesn't make a decision if he has less than 40% of the information, but he always makes a decision if he has between 40 to 70% of the information. He doesn't wait to get 100% or even 80% of the information because by that time it is too late. So that was really freeing, and I kind of wish that Colin Powell had said that to me or to the world back when I was being told, "You better be able to decide and move on, May, otherwise you're not gonna be able to make it up to the leadership ranks."
No, I love that 40/70 decision framework. Heard it before, and it's very effective to have that floor and that ceiling, right? Where you don't want analysis by paralysis, but you want enough information to make an informed decision.
That's right. And in recognizing that you're never going to have as much information as you would like. And then you can adjust and make it better, make it or correct things, correct mistakes afterwards. So yeah.
Well, and some of the great tools that you put in just to help with that decision making practice is make fewer decisions because the human mind per day can only make so many decisions and make them earlier in the day, which is critical too, based on the research that you pulled for the book.
Yeah. So yes, because there is such a thing as decision fatigue. And that's why you want to make the most important decisions early in the day and not. And this is also why you do not want to be checking email first thing in the morning. So I've made this rule, a decision making rule, which is the 100% rule. 100% of the time, I don't check email before breakfast, and and actually that 100% rule is awfully useful too, because if you're on email, there's so many micro decisions that you have to make. You have to, because email is somebody else's agenda for you. So then you have to decide, how do I reply? What am I going to reply? Do I copy all? Do I reply all? And all those are just draining your decision making ability. And the reason that you want to also make decisions earlier in the day has been shown in this study of people making parole decisions. And it turns out that you're more likely to be granted parole if your name comes up earlier in the day. And later in the day, people get tired and they don't want to take risk. This is what the researchers found, and so the decisions of no parole were more likely later in the day.
No, that's great. I mean, that's part of that decision making protocol. And also, what I found insightful about this part was that frame it in being able to frame a decision in different ways makes it easier in some cases. So, if you're presented with something that's important and you face unpleasant trade offs, in these cases of an either or decision where neither option is necessarily attractive, challenge yourself to find a third way that you can take maybe the boast of both alternatives and then create a new one that's superior.
Yeah, and this comes from the work of Roger Martin, who was former McKinsey partner, former dean of Rotman Business School and the University of Toronto. He wrote a book which I love, which is called The Opposable Mind. just like the opposable thumb, the opposable mind. And it riffs off of the F. Scott Fitzgerald quote that the sign of a superior intellect is someone who can hold two opposing ideas in their mind and still be able to function. And so, what this book talks about is when you have an either or, then that is usually a false dichotomy. Almost always there is a third way, a third option, another option, at least one other option. And so often we just default to saying, accepting that it's either this one or that one. And and yeah, so that's why I like to make sure I'm challenging myself and challenging others to figure out, all right, what is a third way that we can do this that's better than either of those two other options and might even be a great option, and really tap into the creativity of the group, the wisdom in the room.
Well, before we move away from this part, this lens of working on the business, I want to just have one more question regarding the transition that people need to make from being a caretaker to a rainmaker. I love these words, and I love kind of this analogy. So, just explain to our listeners what that means when you transition from a caretaker to a rainmaker.
Yeah, okay. So for most of us, we spend a lot of time in caretaker mode. And a caretaker is someone who does what is asked of us to an exceptionally high standard. All right. And when I say that, you're probably thinking, wow, I want my whole team to be like that, right? I have a lot of things I want them to do. I wanted to do it really well so I can get on with more important things. So the thing is that when you're only operating in caretaker mode, then it's very hard for people to see that you can also be somebody who leads, someone with ideas, someone who takes initiative, someone who really drives impact and results and drives change. And that's why you also need to develop your rainmaker muscles. So, a rainmaker is somebody who makes things happen that can be seen, heard, and felt across the organization. And the term rainmaker is one that's from professional services like law firms, right? You've got everybody executing deals, and then you've got a few of these senior rainmakers. They make it rain. They make it rain money. They bring in the big deals, and the same in investment banking. So I was familiar with this term of, hey, yeah, you got to become a rainmaker. That means being really effective with clients and winning business that would feed the entire team, who would then go and execute on it, i.e., be a caretaker. So, in reality, we're all going to be doing caretaker activities part of the time, but we have to make sure we are also engaging in being a rainmaker, because that is really what organizations, teams, units need, and what our clients need in order to be successful and keep growing. We need people who can make things happen in a bigger way, who have the imagination and the ability to influence outcomes. So that those are some of the things that go into becoming a rainmaker, someone who can grow the size of the pie for the entire organization.
And you mentioned too that you can be a rainmaker from any seat, and I love this distinction, right? Caretaker, you process the assignments put in front of you in an excellent way. Rainmaker, someone who makes great things happen for their organization that can be seen, felt, and heard. Because to get ahead in any chosen field, one of the most important things you have to deliver is results. And creating new business is about producing results and outcomes beyond what currently exists.
Exactly. And, just would be useful to have an example of somebody who's a rainmaker from a non-revenue seat.
Or just maybe from your life too. I mean, if you transition from that caretaker role to that rainmaker role, what did that look like, and was it difficult, and what are the different outcomes that you were looking for then?
Yeah, so one of the things that's really important is to do flip a mental switch. All right. And most of our lives, we're in school, let's say, and it's about doing our work, turning in our papers, and hoping that we get an A. And so it's a very passive thing, right? We're waiting for the result. And Rainmaker is the opposite, is saying, okay, let me plow a new furrow in the field. Let me envision and imagine a different way of doing things, not just doing things the current way really, really well. So that's getting more efficient at doing something, but rather expanding opening the aperture of the camera lens, let's say, and maybe having different kinds of conversations with different people to get different information and ideas and data points, and then connecting the dots between those to say, oh, wow, if we borrowed that idea from the telecom sector and applied it here to our client base, I wonder if we could also help our clients to grow their businesses, and by doing so, grow our business. And so it's that kind of thinking and allowing yourself to even do that kind of thinking. So it's getting out of the mode of just, I'm going to keep chopping the wood like this, but then going, say, oh, wow, maybe we can find a different forest.
That's a great example. Thank you. Wanted to make sure that we mentioned the third part, the focus on working on yourself before we end today's conversation. And that's perhaps the most valuable and portable asset you have is you, more so than the school you attended, the car you drive, or the money you have in the bank. And you mentioned three capabilities. The first one of which I think is in dire need by everyone today is to have greater self awareness. How do you build that? You give a great tool in the book called the Johari window to help build that, but maybe you could unpack a few of those practices and that anyone could take to become more self-aware.
One of the things that I always suggest to my clients is that they go and gather some information, because it's hard to be self aware from within yourself. You have to also get information about how people outside of you, external to you, are experiencing you. So, this is where you get some combination of feedback. You can go and ask people, um, how would you describe me as a leader? And and you can say, I've been reading this book. Describe me as a leader, and we're only allowed to use positive words. So you want to make it not scary for you or them. And when you get data from others, you also want to give yourself the same. How would I describe myself? And then you compare those two, right? So you want to reflect and you want to notice, and then you want to devise some experiments to test out different ways of being, different things that you might do or not do, and see how they're landing with other people. And then take what lessons you can and try and improve on how you are coming across. And a lot of this is really about emotional intelligence, being self-aware and able to self-manage in the moment. When you're aware of your tendencies, and we all have good and bad tendencies, and some of our good tendencies taken to extreme become bad tendencies. So it's all okay, and we have to learn to be comfortable in our own skin and do our very best. But this Johari window is really useful, as you were pointing out, and it was developed by two guys who turns out their names are Joe and Harry in Southern California in the 60s. I mean, I imagine maybe they drove around in a VW microbus or whatever they were called, with flower power decals on the side. I don't know, but the way it works is it's a 2 by 2 matrix, and across the top, the columns are things that I know. That's the first column. Second column is things I don't know, and then the first row is things that other people know, and the bottom row is things that other people don't know. So these are like window panes. That's where the window comes in. And so that top left box is those are the things that you know about yourself, and the things that other people know about you. And that's where the window pane is transparent. But those other window panes are not totally transparent. Some of the things you don't know, but they know about you, like, wow, he's got spinach between his teeth is a silly example of one, but, or, "Oh, yeah, don't say XYZ. Don't talk about this topic with Michael because he'll just go off the deep end and you just, not stop talking about how upset he is about it." And then there are other things that they don't know about you, but you know about you, and you have to decide how much of that you wanna reveal. Things that you might wanna reveal are that, "Yeah, I am ambitious. I would like to get promoted." But some of us, myself included, were just always waiting for someone to tell us, "Oh, May, look at you, lucky day. We're gonna promote you," right? But you actually need, as you get more senior, you need to let people know, "Yeah, I'm actually interested in running a, larger group one day," right? So, that's an example of something you would want to expand the Johari window on, so that goes into the known by you and known by them box. Whereas some other things like your, feeling of imposter syndrome, maybe you don't want to let them know that, and you just work on that yourself.
Wonderful. Thanks for unpacking that tool because that really, in that four-step process, gather data, that's part of the gathering. That's a great tool to gather the data. Then you mentioned reflect and notice, step back and look at the data dispassionately and resist the temptation to discard it as irrelevant or to accept it as all completely true because it's partially about you and partially about the giver. And I think that's so critical to emphasize because too many people get defensive or they accept everything and they go down a bad path with themselves. And then devise experiments so you can take action by finding small ways in which you can move into that new behavior. And then, most importantly, probably at the end, is extract the lessons, keep track of what's worked well and where that learning has failed. In my experience, and from your book, there's four main aspects that work together to deliver what we call presence. That's mindset, behavioral, verbal, and physical. Are all four equally important, or is there one in particular that you would find would be best to start with, or the most important?
Yeah, so I think the most important one to start with is your own mindset, because I believe that mindset affects behavior, which affects results. So if you're in a good mindset, like, I got this, I know myself, I'm confident, and I can add value to any room I'm in, all right? Then all the rest will follow much more easily, because mindset, therefore the way you behave reflects how you are conceptualizing yourself, what your own self identity is, your degree of confidence, and how comfortable you're you are in your own skin. It also then will affect your verbal communications, how you're speaking, what kinds of ideas you're able to have on the fly, and how quick on your feet you can be. And then also on the physical, because you'll be, just standing up straighter and so forth. Now, there's one thing I would say about the physical, because these are all related. So I've said I think mindset is sort of the linchpin, but there is a body of work out there that suggests that you can, um, do things physically that will help you to be more, feel better mentally, and therefore be more effective in your behavior and your speaking. And that is Amy Cuddy's work on power posing. I forgot the name of her book, but she also has a
I
TED
think it's
Talk.
presence, right?
Presence, yeah. Gosh, Charles, I teed that up for you.
You did. Alley oop. Right.
Yes, it's called Presence. And, I've also learned from the Royal Academy of Dance and the Arts, RADA, in London. They had an event where they had 35 of us or so in the group, and, they were all about, it was a corporate kind of audience, but they were trying to show us how our physicality really affects the way that we show up and also our mental state. And so they had 2 of us. volunteer to leave the room and do a different movements for 2 minutes. So my movement was to start way down low on the floor and curl up in a little ball and then expand. So I was doing small to big for 2 minutes. This other person was doing the opposite. They started expanding and then they shrank. So they were shrinking for 2 minutes. And then they had us walk back into the room and had the rest of the people guess who had been doing which exercise. Well, the door opened, we only started walking in, and they immediately knew that I was the one doing the expanding and the other person was doing the shrinking because I came bounding into the room and the other person was kind of like this because she'd just been shrinking for 2 minutes. And so that is the other counter to maybe physical might work better for you or someone out there.
When some of the questions that you give in the book, which I think are great, from mindset to what extent do you like and believe in yourself? How do you want to show up? Behavioral, how do you sit and stand? Verbal, how do you speak? What's your tone, the speed, the volume, the clarity of what your speech? And then physical, how do you dress relative to others? What's your facial expressions like? Because those are so critical. And you're right, they make up so much of your presence. And now let's talk about your brand and your reputation. If you could define both of those and help us to close that gap between your brand and your reputation.
Yeah. So this is all about your profile, right? If your brand is what you want to convey to others and your reputation is how they actually receive you, and there's a gap, then the way that I like to work on closing it is to first just get really clear on what that gap is. And you can do this by going to people that you trust and who know you professionally and ask them, what are the 3 to 5 words or phrases that come to mind when you think of me as a leader? And when you collect all of those, then you can form a really nice picture of how you are being perceived. That's your reputation. And then you compare that to the 3 to 5 words you want people to say in the future about you. And then you start like comparing those, and then you work on closing those gaps. So that just gives you a lot of clues as to which ones to really home in on.
I always like to end each episode, May, with a call to action. What would be the first thing that listeners of the podcast could do in terms of these capabilities? Like you said, focus on the ones that really matter the most. Is there one area that you would recommend they focus on first?
Yeah, well, it's very personal to each of us without knowing exactly what each person's situation is. So, in general, I would suggest that if you really want to rise to the higher ranks of leadership, that you work on your executive presence because that is such an important part of getting to the next level. It's almost as though you have to be seen as already being an executive in order to become named as an executive or promoted to a level of executive.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, focus on executive presence. Definitely agree. A lot of great insights in your book regarding that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program today, May. Let our listeners know how they can get in contact with you and learn more about your work.
Thank you so much. If you want to find me at maybusch.com, and I have a free blog newsletter. Follow me on LinkedIn. It's May Busch, and look forward to supporting you in your career advancement.
I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.